racism, anti-Semitism, classism, and when I saw it, I fought it, and I would recommend to all good, right-thinking Americans, when they see it, to fight it, realizing that today they probably lose, but tomorrow they may win, and the world will be a better place. Even if they should lose outright, the world will still be a better place because they've said it's wrong.
Okay, I'd like to thank you all for giving me an answer on my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take a quick break. You hear the noise in the background because the public is coming in, different speakers wanting to ask you questions, and so you're invited to join us at the Teen Forum for Teens Talking. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and joining us is a very good honor. It's definitely Mr. Michael Mitchell.
Right, I'm Michael Vaughn Mitchell Sr.
All right. And we have a teen now, Davon, who's at the podium, and we're to ask the senior some questions.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet all of you. My first question is to, thank you, Mr. DWIGHT. What effect do you think the parents of teens play in the decisions of their children? And do you believe that the rappers have more of an influence over the parents in the group?
Well, I sort of addressed a few moments ago the influence of the rappers in terms of the teens. I don't necessarily accept that the rappers, if your question is, have any influence over the parents. Not that I've been able to observe. I think their contact and their psychological and mental messages and verbal messages go directly to our young teenagers. That's the danger, as I indicated before, of the negative instead of the positive, because our young people are so open to being impressed and being absorbed in that culture. And that's why I think, as I said before, they have such a tremendous responsibility. Now, what has been the debate that has been opened, if not directly, indirectly by Mr. Cosby and others, is whether or not we as parents in our communities, for whatever reasons, whether we in fact displaying that type of reflection or that type of representation or that type of image that we want our young people to follow. Mr. Cosby opened a national debate on this when he attacked the parents in our communities in terms of when he said, I think his words were, you listen to the children and then you talk to the parents and you understand why the children are in the predicament they're in. So I do, not whether it's not I agree with that, but I do think our parents play a large role in the culture or the development of our young people. And we have to ask ourselves some question as to whether or not we have to, as Judge Johnson and I were talking earlier, as we as a people, whether we have to absorb some of the responsibility for the situation that we're in. I think the answer to that has to be yes. We can talk about drugs, we can talk about economic conditions, we can talk about racism, we can talk about discrimination, we can talk about all the things that we know affect our communities. But have we lived up to our responsibility as parents, as role models, as leaders in our community for our young people?
All right. So what do you think the state of the youth is in today's generation? Do you think it's the same? Do you think there's a big change?
I think there has been, to be quite candid, I have to agree that there has been a negative movement in terms of our community. And again, we've discussed this for a few moments in terms of the things that have been put into our community in terms of narcotics, the disparity, the fact that our educational system is in shams, that we find not only in Baltimore City that the state has not contributed to its share of funding for education, but across this nation. That's not just something that just developed. As I've been appointed to the Board of Regents, I've been seeing studies where this is the same trend in higher education, corresponding exactly to the rise of color in our higher educational circles. As the populations of color increase, the funding decreases. And so this is not just a phenomenon in terms of public education. It's a phenomenon in terms of public education, meaning public higher education. So when you see these types of trends, you have to say, is that benign neglect, or is it obvious neglect, or is it a systematic situation where our educational systems have been aborted in terms of our urban communities, which in fact works as a negative to our young people. And so I do think that for all these reasons that I've stated and what has taken place, that's why our young people are in a tremendous predicament. And we talked earlier, we can't get a civil rights movement going. You can't even get, with all the kids in jail and all the kids that are involved in out here on the streets for whatever reason, you can't get 100 kids, when I say kids, young people, to be part of a protest, because most of those 100 people have factors that have infected them or affected them negatively. And so I think we're seeing the results of this anti-climate as to our young people. And I think Judge Johnson spoke to that very well, but I took a little different approach, because I do believe that this is something which has been activated and actively pursued by some areas of our government. I don't believe that we just got into this condition accidentally or just by development. I believe it's something that was decided and something that has taken place over a period of years. And so I don't think we are in a good condition. I think our young people are in a very, very dangerous and negative condition in terms of their relationships with the rest of society.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dwight. Now, I have a question for Judge Johnson. Have you ever encountered an act of racism that to this day has still affected you?
Yes. I was born and raised, and I got corrected on that when I got to Washington, D.C. I was told that I should say born and reared in Mississippi, but I was born and raised in Mississippi. And my first, second, and third grade book was the same book. It was a hand-me-down from the white school. You could look in the book on the inside cover and tell which white kid had it, and you knew the white kids because we were neighbors generally in the South. And in that book, there was this picture of a young black boy, approximately 10 years old, who had very, very dark skin. And he had on a pair of overalls, of my favorite dress, and the sun hat on, and he had these pearly white teeth, and he was smiling to the heavens. And in his hands, holding with both hands, was a great big piece of red, ripe watermelon. And the caption of that picture said, "Our colored folks are happy." And I've spent every moment of my awakened life to show white America that no, we are not. So yes, that was a very defining moment.
Now, I remember you saying earlier that if you see racism, you should attack it. So my question is, do you find yourself in a cycle after someone's racially attacked you? Do you find yourself racially attacking them?
Oh no, you can never do that. I've never done that. My father taught me as a very young child that hate was a condition of the human, anger was a condition of the human spirit. It's okay to get angry about certain things, but you could never get too angry, and you had to control your anger. But hate, on the other hand, was an evil, and it would destroy your soul. So if I get to hate someone because they hate me, then I'm in the same condition as that person, and that person has defined me in my life, and I'm not going to let anybody define me or my life. So turn the other cheek, love the brother, and march right on, but you continue to work at what he's done and confronting that. You confront that. When I was a kid of 22, that you probably heard of, I was one of the 7 leaders who led the third sit-in in the whole nation, the first one being by James Farm in Chicago in the 50s, and then the students at North Carolina A&T in January 1960, and then the sit-in at Southern University March 28, 1960. We went to jail, got beat, got stiff jail sentences. Thurgood Marshall came in, we went to Supreme Court, we won December the 11th, 1960, and the Civil Rights Movement was on. So we have to fight racism or any kind of discrimination.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Back to the teen forum for Teens Who Are Talking, and another teen who's up at the podium now is Davon Williams.
All right. Mr. Mitchell, I have a question for you. My question is, it's a two-part question. What part does the black churches play in the lives of the black youth? And do you believe that tradition is causing many of our youth to leave the church?
Well, I think you have to retrace the history of the church and the church's purpose in this country. My late grandmother, Dr. Lily Mae Carroll Jackson, used to say that church was the cheapest form of psychiatry going. You could come and relieve all the stress and whatever have you, sitting in church. And a good many of the ministers have the courage of their convictions to, throughout history, and I'm talking about before the establishment of what we know as these various denominations, but the courage to assemble people and then to worship, even though that was not their religion. A good many of the slaves coming here were Muslim. And therefore, this whole notion of Christ and whatever have you was kind of foreign to them, and they didn't believe, but they recognized that Christ was a prophet. But they saw church as a vehicle to try to give some psychiatry and some support and some comfort to people who had been abused, mothers who had lost their children and been sold in slavery, things of that nature, people who had been beaten, whole families disbanded. So people could make money. The church has and still plays a critical role. I went to, and still a member of Sharp Street Memorial United Methodist Church, although still my family, member of New Shiloh Baptist. But there was a thing called the Methodist Youth Fellowship. And some of the same things, and I'm not that young, I'm 58 years old, so. But when I was growing up, the question was whether or not the church was answering the needs of young people. And I went and joined in a picket line of the Methodist Church because I didn't think that they were answering the needs of young people in my community. And I said, here we had the Sharp Street Memorial United Methodist Church Community House right next to it, and we wanted to hold a dance in the community. And you would have thought we were causing the end of the world. And we wanted to have socials, as we call them, to have people, and all chaperoned and supervised. And to me, it just made a lot of sense that here, you couldn't turn down the lights, so you didn't have any problem, but it became an opportunity for young people just to get to know one another on Friday nights. So that you wouldn't be out at parties and things, kind of wholesome activities. We started to do that, and then we started interacting with the other white Methodist groups. Methodists, as you see, were part and parcel of all of this whole notion of the slave trade in this country and everything else. And of course, if you travel outside of the East and Southeast, the people who run this country are the Methodists. You have the Methodist Church in Texas, you got the Methodist Church throughout California. And
We welcome you. We urge you to come back and join us the next time we do our teen forum here at the Great Blacks in Wax Mansion. Like Nia said, it's your voices that need to be heard, and this is a great way for your voices to be heard and any opinions that you have or any questions that you have.